Hello and welcome to part 3 of a series of tutorials where I show you an error message and how to resolve it. In this case, we'll be looking at the out of range error message. What I've got is 4 different examples, and what I'll do with each example is produce the error message and then show you how to resolve it. Before I get started, I just wanted to say apologies for not doing a YouTube video in January or February. This is because it's been really crazy new year, both professionally and personally. But hopefully from now on, we'll start to get back up to speed with, I'm not sure about weekly anymore, but definitely once every 2 weeks. Okay, let's get started. So the first example is just with a simple list. So if I zoom in here, I've created a list called sum numbers. Just some random numbers really, 1 to 5. And what I'm going to do firstly is print some numbers. What I'm going to do is print more specifically a number within that list. So if I run it on the output, you can see I've printed 3. So I've printed some numbers and position 2, in this case, which is 3, because it starts at 0. So 0, 1, 2 is 3. So that's all fine. So what if I did print some numbers 6? So if I go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we should hopefully get the error message, because what we've done is we've specified out of the range of the list. So if I run it again, we'll get this error message, link index is out of range. So in this case, we've specified beyond the length of the list, and that produces this out of range problem. So when I show you the second example, in this case, we have a 2D array. So let's start with just normal printing of a 2D array. So if I run it, we'll go across row number 0 and then along to column 1. Maybe it'd be easier if I just show you like this. So what we've got is row 0, column 1, because remember it starts at 0, so 0, 1. And that here is 2. So all fine. But what if I did printed that? If I did row 4, oh, we've gone out of range. So here we go, we have list index out of range again, similar to the list error. And what if I did the same, but with the columns this time? We get the same error message. So with both examples, it's to do with going beyond the length of the list or the array. And that's a very key concept, is you've got to understand sort of that this error message comes about when you go beyond the scope of the list or array that you're calling. So if we move on to the third example, in this case we've got a loop, and more specifically a while loop. What I've got is an empty list called numbers, and I've got I equals 1, my variable I, and I've said while I is less than 30, I want numbers I to equal I plus 1, and then I want to print this list numbers. And so if I run this, notice that we have list assignment index out of range. So different sort of error message, but it's still messaging the list index out of range. But in this case, it's list assignment index. And what does that mean? Well, the error in this case is because numbers is an empty list, and I equals 1. And we're not appending anything to the numbers list. So when we're printing numbers, we're printing an empty list. So there's nothing to print. So we're printing numbers which equals I plus 1, which is, I guess, 1 or 2. But there is no position 1 or 2. So it throws up this error message because we've gone out of the range of the list because it's empty. So the trick here is to, let me just unblock this. The trick here is to add the append and also to change this numbers I equals I plus 1. You don't need this numbers bracket section. What you need to do then is keep the numbers empty list, keep the I equals 1, keep this while I is less than 30, that's all great. But then, within the while loop, you need to type in or append essentially I to the list, the existing numbers I, and then if you want to increment it up by 1 by doing I equals I plus 1, or I is plus or equal to I. That does the same thing. And then you can print the list. And then when you run this, you will get your printed out list here with no error message. Moving on to the final example. In this case, we'll be showing you this example using a graph. What I'll do is import matplotlib.pyplot as PLT, and I'll create two lists, X and Y. And what this will do is represent points on the list. So if we plot it, XY with a blue, let's do as dots rather than line, and then we show it. We see here we've got 4 points. And what we can do is if we specify 1 point, let's go 2, x2, y2, and then plot it again, we see here we've got 1 point. But what if we then specify outside? Let's change that back to blue circles, and let's go x5, y2. And then we run it. We see here we've got list index out of range. And it follows exactly the same principle as the previous examples, where we've gone outside the range of x value here. It also works the same with y as well. Another thing to be aware of is that in some cases where you're plotting graphs, you may have axis equals 0 or axis equals 1. And what you're doing here is you're specifying it to be on the x or y axis. And what you're doing is you're creating maybe a 2 or 3D graph. But if you're creating a 2D graph and you put axis equals 2, you'll also get list index out of range error. So that's another thing to be aware of. Well, that's it for this tutorial. I hope you've really enjoyed it. Please subscribe, please share, and please watch out for my next tutorial coming out in a couple of weeks or so. Thank you very much for watching.